Morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the conference. Really happy to see such a big crowd today already, and we're going to continue with session 13, the ICEBP session, which is a subcommittee of MSECT. We have 3 speakers today, and we're going to try and keep it in time. We're going to start with the boys today, Mr. Mark Martin. He's the President and CEO of Redline Perfusion and Consulting, and as well as the current Director of Perfusion Services at the North Florida Hospital in Gainesville, Florida. That's a lot of Floridas there. Next up will be Mellisa Duarte. She's a CCP and the perfusionist at the NY Presbyterian in Well Cornell. And then last but not least, Shahna Helmick. Also CCP at the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics, and also the Program Director of the Perfusion Education Program at the University of Iowa. They're gonna put the fun in fundamental, I think, and but first they will give a roundup on the different subcommittees from the ICEBP. Mark, the podium is for you.
Green button?
Yep, green button.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, the light's kind of bright after last night's beverages. Thank you all for coming in early this morning, and look, it's nice to see that New Orleans didn't get the best of most of you. Your colleagues are still upstairs sleeping, or they're going to miss out on a good session this morning. Anyways, before I get started, I just wanted to let you know that there are still some tickets available for the Sazerac event this evening. If you haven't had a chance to walk by and take a look inside, it's a beautiful location. We're going to have some music, some beverages, and some fellowship, so please sign up. And also, if you haven't had a chance, write a note, a nice card for some of our pediatric patients. We're going to be delivering those next week. All right, so let's move on. All right, so I'm going to represent the Standards and Guidelines Committee. Our ICEBP is made up of different subcommittees that we work on different projects throughout the year. Some of them are short projects, some of them are very long, drawn-out projects. So for our Standards and Guidelines Committee, we're going to talk about the scope of practice. So, okay, I know we're missing a slide, but we'll get through it. The purpose of the what's going on? All right. The purpose of the scope of practice review is that we had to take a look at the current document. That you can make the notes smaller because I can't see the other part. Thank you. The purpose of the scope of practice review was to look at a document that's fairly dated, and our goal was to bring it up to current standards and make sure that it really identified things that we were currently doing versus the things that we weren't doing. Wanted to make it all-inclusive, but we're keeping in mind that it's actually a living document. So as our technology and our techniques improve and expand, our goal is to continuously to review that document and update it as necessary. The big overarching definition is that the scope of practice describes the procedures and actions and processes that a healthcare practitioner is permitted to do. Keeping in mind that the role and everything that we do, it falls under the guise of our education and experience and our competencies. Oh man, you're killing me back there. We had some varied input from various members, both encompassing both adults and pediatric perfusionists. We had members of the Quality Committee, members of the Safety Committee, and the GRC Committee all give us input to make sure that we were touching upon every aspect of perfusion, and that we are categorizing each of the items specifically and accordingly to what we do. So what we did was we teased out all our clinical items within the scope of practice, and we made 3 distinct categories. The first one was extracorporeal circulation, the next one was ancillary functions, and the last one was mechanical circulatory support items. And within those items, we kind of saw some of the items that were needed, things like not limited to extracorporeal CO2 removal, and standby for high-risk procedures. These things were not previously listed as within our scope. Within the ancillary items, we added things like thrombectomy. If you're using the angiovac device, this is what should encompass that. Organ procurement and transports for those of you doing NRPs. And then within the MCS department or areas, we looked at adding things like participation in ACLS procedures. Now, these things I just mentioned aren't the only things we added, so I encourage all of you to go back and take a look at some of the items that were added. But just to give you a taste of how things evolved and how things were added and changed. And the way this occurred was, and after we completed this item, the AMSIC sent out to the membership a survey back in earlier this year, and we got some good feedback. But we also got some questions as to, this is not done at our hospital, why should it be done at our scope of practice? I mean, why should we add it? I'm not sure what this is. Is it even relevant to what we do anymore? In addition to that, there are items like that are currently listed, are items like surgical assist and vein harvesting, which actually cause maybe some aggravation amongst the membership as to what we do. But the reality of this process is that we don't want to exclude some procedures that are being done in its rarity at some hospital, just because it's rarely done. So our mindset was, let's add, let's not remove the items. The other section, if you're familiar with the scope of practice, the previous document included some non-clinical items, including research, supply chain management, recertification procedures, simulation training, things of that nature. So what we did was we teased those out and we added those to it's going to be a separate document, tentatively called professional standards or performance standards, just so we could have two separate documents, one that encompasses clinical items and one that encompasses non-clinical items. Some limitations that we found are going to be that, keep in mind that the scope of practice, the list of duties, are sometimes used in the bill writing process. As a member of the GRC committee, it's part of our template that we offer membership. So when you do have to write a bill and you're trying to go out for licensure, it's easy to cut and paste and put this into your bill writing or in your actual law. You also have to keep in mind that these items are not necessarily supersede. So this is a scope of practice document does not supersede your existing licensing act as well. So if some of these items are not in your licensing act, you may want to talk to your government relations liaison and government relations subcommittee member to see if you can incorporate some of these newer items into your current practice. And lastly, from a competency perspective, education perspective, just because you're listed in your scope of practice does not necessarily mean that you are competent to do it. And then as a guidance items, we reference you to go ahead and take a look at the standards and guidelines, take a look at your institutional policies, some of the protocols that the quality committee has written, and also take a look at, if you're referencing something like for your blood management items, take a look at your AABB standards or your SABM standards as well. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and email us at icebp@msic.org. We're still in the review process. The actual scope of practice document has not been finalized, so we're still open to hear some input from you guys. Thank you. Good? All right. So, quality improvement and registry. One project we're working on is creating an actionable post-operative debrief document, which aims to improve team communications in the form of involving perfusionists more in the debriefing process. And our goal is the overarching thought is to involve us, improve communication and teamwork and feedback, and ultimately learn from issues. Now, debriefing and briefings and debriefings sometimes are used interchangeably, keeping in mind that that's probably not necessarily appropriate. Your pre-briefing should be done pre-procedure in preparation of what's going on. Your debriefing is something that's a tool, a communication tool that's used post-operatively to learn from mistakes and necessarily try to create a better working environment. Handoffs, obviously, a continuity of care and how those are usually in time, real-time needs for some emergent, urgent need. So the WHO surgical checklist, which you all probably are using or should be using, involves these three facets, which is your pre-briefing items, which is separated into two items, your pre-assign-in, which is associated with your pre-anesthesia, and your timeout, which is pre-incision. Our goal today is to focus on the post-operative part, the debriefing part. The post-operative part usually involves things like right count, Were there any issues with the instruments? Are the specimens labeled? And then there's a small opportunity to discuss the post-operative care for this patient, how we're going to manage the patient post-operatively. But there's not really a facet to discuss things that went well and things that went wrong, and that's really our project that we're currently working on. So it's going to be, we're looking for a multidisciplinary, multi-center study proposal that it's in the process, we're in the planning process. But if you look up debriefing on the internet, you're going to find a multitude of documentations that talk about the benefits and the validation of a debriefing project. It does not necessarily, is not necessarily perfusion forward. And our goal is to create some of that perfusion forward. So we're going to start asking, so, and to create the toolkit that we need, we have to actually ask poignant questions as far as something like, how often do you feel like you're able to voice a concern post-operatively? Or is the surgeon walking out of the room after he says, are the counts correct? Once we get understanding of what your cultural norms are, we create a question bank, a question matrix that ultimately will give us, will divide the toolkit. So not only are we going to ask, are the counts correct? Are the instruments broken? Do you need anything? But also let's discuss about things that went wrong, not just things that went wrong, not just things that went wrong. Let's talk about things that went well. And I actually try to promote good behavior and good communication within the operative arena. And ultimately, the goal is to create something that would create what we consider a protective time, a hard stop. We have a hard timeout stop, but we have a hard time debriefing timeout. A debriefing hard stop, where there's opportunity for every team member to be able to provide feedback as far as what's going on in the case. Did you have venous drainage issues again? Were your needs or your concerns and tendencies to listen to you when you realized that you had very high blood pressure and you had no way of managing it, things of that nature. And then after that, we're going to follow up to make sure that your voice has been heard. In other words, was there something that needed to be escalated and you had a tool or an avenue to escalate whatever issues you may have had during the case, or were your concerns just brushed under the rug and not given the importance that it needed? And that's it. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'll be speaking about the International and Domestic Collaboration Subcommittee today. So the first project that we've been working on is a universal bypass checklist. This is encompassing 46 countries and 19 international perfusion societies. We surveyed representative societies to rank items within each section of the checklist to determine prioritization and reduce checklist fatigue. The modified Delphi approach was what was used, which is where you rate, discuss, and then re-rate items to avoid the checklist becoming too long and cumbersome, as well as giving time for feedback and changes before finalization. This is a copy of the draft. We're currently trying to whittle this down to 1 page, so the total number of items here might not be in the final draft. The second thing that we've been working on is an on-pump podcast collaboration, which is something that Tiffany and I started last year, so we just hit our anniversary with the podcast. And
your visual one way.
Oh.
That's not something we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you guys are seeing a very different slide to what we're seeing up here at the moment, so I think we just keep playing catch up.
Have you seen the prior presentation completely?
We missed her slides.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Okay, so this on-pump podcast collaboration is going to be a series of interviews with representatives from various countries. We're hoping to cover topics such as education, standards and guidelines, clinical practice differences, and what the future clinician looks like. Thank you.
I'm going to be talking about the PINTS subcommittee. We are working on a project to implement non-technical skills into training non-technical skills training into perfusion education. As all of you know, the ACPE is our body regulation for the curriculum for perfusion schools. And now that I'm involved in the perfusion education program, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. And so this is a typical outline of what our curriculum looks like. This is our guideline, our objectives, learner objectives, and then an outline of exactly what we're supposed to teach on each topic. So whether it's anatomy, whether it is congenital, whether it is pumps, pediatric pumps, adult pumps, etc. That's what it looks like. And as I've spoken before about, what we don't have is non-technical skills. So the curriculum at this point looks like this. We have basic science, we have mechanical assist, we have ethics, history, research, all of those topics. But what we don't have right now are non-technical skills as part of our ACPE approved curriculum. So we are working as a committee to try to bring in some of these non-technical skills into a formal curriculum process. So we would be working with the students on teaching them decision-making skills, situational awareness skills like that. And of course, this comes from the foundation, and this was mentioned yesterday as well, from the PINTS project, which was the Perfusionist Intraoperative Non-Technical Skills. And this is the format that they use, and you can see it probably a little bit better than I can on this screen, but it's broken up into the different categories and the elements. And so what we're looking to do is Bruce Searles and his team have done a really good job taking this project and working on simulation, like hands-on skills, and how we can work on training those as well. But what we also want to do is develop an actual in-classroom didactic course. There are some out there, Team Steps works on these skills as well, but what we want to do is create an actual curriculum for the classroom for all of the programs. And so that's what we're working on. So again, as program directors, we want to hit all of these different parts of everybody's learning, because everybody learns differently. So we have to focus first on the didactic, which is kind of our role, and then we work on those skills, those same skills again. In simulation, we practice them. And then in the clinical arena, we actually get to put them in use. And so what we're trying to do is take the PINTS categories and elements. And then the second part of the project is this. This is the last part of the project right now. This is NOTS, which is the Surgeon's Non-Technical Skills curriculum. And what we want to do is we want to take PINTS and then create this part 2. And what we can do is we can actually create good behaviors and bad behaviors, or I think they're called poor, excuse me, good behaviors and poor behaviors. And what we do is then we have actual skills that we can check off and actually evaluate the use of the non-technical skills in simulation lab, so that when we are in the operating room, we can also work on those skills and actually have specific criteria to discuss and evaluate. So it's a work in progress, but I do believe our next step is going to be a survey. So when you get an email from me, please answer it and do not delete it, because we do appreciate your feedback, and we want to work on this curriculum for the students and improve patient care in the long run. So thank you.
These presentations are now open for discussion, so if you have any questions, please come up to the microphone. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up in public, you can always use the app to add a question or comment or something you want to say. And Don.
Hi, Don Nieder from the University of Michigan and all the associated Michigan stuff, and I never feel uncomfortable talking. Mark, your presentation was incredibly timely for the university, for all the associated Michigan stuff. When do you think that's going to be ready, the debrief? And the reason I say, and I realize I've got everybody here, I might as well pick your minds. My 2 talks, I talked about, practice variation and as we were going through slides for the last meeting, we realized across the collaborative, we see that same practice variation in terms of debriefing post-op. And then I reached out to sites who did debriefs, and I found the same practice variation. The debrief ranged from everything from a very formal thing to, I said how the case goes, so that way I get to check it off and perform and said we conducted a debrief. And would like to formalize it that a little bit more. So number one, when does that be ready? Because if that could be ready by the first of next year, that would be awesome. Number two, some other feedback I've gotten is, Niter, this is just another thing I have to do. I don't see any value in a debrief. So I guess I'd ask the people here, if there was a formal debrief, do you do debriefs now? And if so, do you see a value in debriefs? C, would you see a value in a formalized debrief process to standardize stuff, or is that yet another thing you have to do? So, thank you.
The answer is not anytime soon, and yes. Not anytime soon, and yes. No, just aside, the goal for this was, I don't know if you can hear me, the goal for this was started, the thought of this started a while ago. And it's just an idea that we've been bouncing around, and it's been on the back burner, and I think it's time to bring it up to the forefront and make it a reality. So right now we're just beta testing a couple of questions. Thank you. A couple of questions at different institutions just to trying to get some feedback. We haven't formalized an IRB for it yet. We're just trying to, like I said, we're trying to understand what the cultural norms are to find out where's the low-hanging fruit. Once we get that, then we'll probably start promoting it.
And just forgive me to follow up, but the reason for that was people above me tend to be nursing and nursing type, and they simply didn't believe the debrief data. It's like, it's an ARN standard. Of course, Niter, you've got this all wrong. All these sites are doing debriefs. They have to be, it's an AORN standard. And I said, they're not entering it. I don't think they are. And so immediately when these nurses found out this wasn't happening, they were like, this is going to be a perfusion initiative. And I thought, I don't know if perfusionists are going to like that, but I can understand why it would be important. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Don. I think it's not just that you're doing a debrief, it's the quality of the debrief that needs to be done. And really it needs to address all facets. We're obviously, more keen to what's happening behind the pump for us, but the same thing could be happening for the circulator nurse, for the anesthesiologist, for the anesthesiologist assistant. All multidisciplinary team members of that suite should have a voice in the OR, and that voice should be heard, and this is our chance to try to make that happen. Thank you, Don. Michael?
Mike Colligan, Houston, Texas. I just wanted to say on behalf of perfusionists, thank you to everyone on the ICEBP. I think a lot of people at home probably may or may not know, but that scope of practice document is incredibly important, and you don't really know that it's great to have it available until you need it available for a variety of different reasons. So as new technologies come to your facility, new procedures come to your facility, or things are evolving that you want to look at in your practice, this is a great resource for everyone really to look at. And I know it encompasses a huge amount of work, and at the end of it, you've got a document that people look at every once in a while, but when they need it, they really need it. So I just wanted to say thank you and let everybody at home know you really have the opportunity to look at this anytime and use it to your benefit.
Thank you, Michael. I think it's one of many tools that ANTEC does provide for the membership, and participating in your professional society I think it's key. It's where we share knowledge, it's where we share experiences, it's where we share fellowship with each other, and then we learn from each other. So to have these great tools at our disposal really it's overwhelming the amount of support that we have as a professional society, and I'm grateful. As far as the ICBP, we thank you as well. And I'm not sure if I can speak for everybody, but the ICBP does a ton of work that we didn't even mention today. And there's high priority, there's mid priorities, there's low priorities, and then there's the dreamers section of things that we would want to do at some point, but we don't have the bandwidth to do it. So thank you for that. I know we appreciate it.
Okay, there's no questions from the online community, so I think we're going to proceed with the rest of the session.
Yeah, we just wanted take a moment and remind people that the ICBP really works towards succession planning and opportunities for volunteers. So if there's anybody out in the audience that's interested in any sort of position within the society, feel free to use the email at the bottom of this slide set and reach out to us with your comments, your feedback, or any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
All right, ready for some fun? We're gonna have some fun. All right, so again, I'm Shahna Helmick. I am doing this presentation today with my gal, Mellisa Duarte, and Mark helped us put this together, so we are extremely grateful for you, Mark. First of all, Mel and I wanted to start off today with letting you know we have no disclosures. You're gonna be surprised by this by the end of this, but we were not paid for this. We are not statisticians, we are not research scientists, but we are two cool gals. We are two cool gals who raise our hands way too often, and we are going to have fun today. So we are gonna have so much fun that we actually changed the title of this session. So I know it's super early on a Saturday morning, but Mel and I were asked to host this session. And I was so excited to work with Mel because I think that she is just so amazing. I met her a couple years ago and I just felt like she was just this awesome passion. I just couldn't wait to work with her. And then we were on the call and then they announced what the topic of our session was going to be. And it was one of those moments, I'm sure we were messaging and kind of not even really paying attention when we raised our hands. And they were like, oh, the topic of your session is going to be back to basics. Journal, article, interpretation, analysis, and critique. And we both looked at each other on Zoom and we were like, what? And then we were like, oh no. So we were like, so we instantly were texting each other. We're like, oh no, like we're gonna have to make this fun. Like, what is this? You know, we have an entire session about journal article interpretation. Interesting. We wanted to make it fun. We wanted to have attendance at 8 a.m. So I said to Mel, I'm like, Mel, I'm fun. Like, are you fun?
Me?
Yeah.
Heck yeah, I'm fun.
Yeah. So we're fun. So we're like, okay, we're gonna do this. So we are having so much fun today that you are gonna have fun. So we even brought a game, right? So you all have a bingo card on your table. If you don't have a bingo card, let me know because my wonderful students will bring you one. You are expected to play. Don't think you're getting out of this. I will find you. So grab your bingo card. And the exciting thing about this is that your free space is obviously your ICEBP. So I gave you a free one right off the bat. So go ahead and mark that one. And this is a quick version of bingo because of time frame. So you have to do a blackout bingo. Exactly. Okay? So you have to fill every single box. Okay? And you want to know the best part about it? We have prizes. We have prizes. So I am so, yeah, right? See? Woo! I hear you over there. See, I told you we were gonna have fun. So I'm really sorry online. There's no prizes for you, but you can have fun with us today. And again, we wanted to make this session fun and we wanted to have a good time. So raise your hand if you don't have a card. I see my wonderful students over there handing out cards and we're gonna have a good time. Oh. Un momento. I need the card with the answers in it. I had it over there on the thing. Oh, no.
What do you need?
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it. Oh, you can see it. Okay, sorry. Okay, we're ready. We're fine. Just kidding. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but usually when I start my meeting, I kind of need to see both. I'm sorry, I'm old. Thank you. So when I start my meetings, I start out at these meetings and I'm super excited and I have this beautiful to-do list, and I'm like, okay, when I get home, I'm gonna read all of these articles, and I'm so excited, and like all these smart people get up and they're like, you should read this article, and I write it all down, and I have this beautiful list. And then, you know, about halfway through the meeting, usually by Saturday, it starts to look like this, you know? And then I'm like, oh man, I forgot to get the oil change, you know, and I'm like, dang it, you know, a van's gonna blow up. And I have a lot of kids, like I need the minivan, right? So, you know, and then I get home and I'm like, oh, by the end of the meeting on Sunday afternoon, that's what my notes look like, right? And then I'm like, oh, you know, and I wanted to read those articles, I really, really did, right? But the problem is, I get home and I'm completely, I don't have time, right? Reading those papers and reading all the research articles that we want to read, it's a commitment. It's time that we don't have, right? And so our goal here today is to talk to you about what we call the fundamentals of what it takes to read a research article. So our goal is just to break it down, make it a little easier, and have fun when you want to read a research article. So, as most of you know, I've talked a lot about how I am a huge reader. I do love real books, but one of my favorite parts about when I read on a Kindle is that when you click on a word that you don't know, it gives you the definition right away, and I love definitions. So that's what we're going to start with, because I feel like every time you're learning something new, you have to have the foundation, which is the definitions. So I'm going to start off with definitions here. And the first one we're going to talk about is sample size, which is the small n. Then we're going to talk about confidence interval, p-value, power, and limitations.
Sorry, does that mean we can cross them off now?
No, not yet, not yet. Okay, so when you're talking about sample size, so you grab your paper and the first thing you're looking at is your sample size, right? So you've got your, I'm really sorry, but can you make that so I can see the slide and the notes again?
The slides
Is that not an option?
on the screen down there.
Make the slide size bigger.
Like it was before? Sorry,
Thank you.
guys.
Other way, yeah. It's hard to catch that sucker.
There you go. Oh, that'll work. Yep, thank you. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Appreciate you. He's like, I'm done with you guys by the end of this meeting. He's gonna go to Bourbon Street. Okay. Okay, so back to sample size. So when you're talking about sample size, so first of all, they always give you the population, right? And then they take the population and they break it down into sample. So the population is literally everybody, right? So the population, for example, would be your 2,000 cardiac patients that you're looking at that are in EPIC, right? But the sample size is the number of individuals that they choose for the actual study. So that then would be when you break it down and you've taken out your inclusion and your exclusion criteria, inclusion, exclusion criteria, you break it down. So then that would be your cabbage patients that you've chosen to evaluate that are between the ages of 18 and 65. That's just an example. So you've got your population, which is referred to as the large N, and you've got your sample size, which is referred to as the small n. Easy peasy, right? Now, confidence interval. This one took me like a week, okay? So when you get to the statistics section, see, I can't even say it, that's the hardest part. Once I stopped sweating, okay, then I realized there's only 3 parts that I really start thinking about, okay? And I break it down into confidence interval, p-value, and power. So confidence interval, and you can look at my beautiful picture there, right? So all that means is that what you're evaluating is that you're estimating that your results, you're saying that 95% of your values will fall into that range. So for example, if you're evaluating the nadir hematocrit and you have a range of 18% to 40%, you're saying that I am confident that 95% of my results will fall between 18 and 40%. That's it. That's it. That is your confidence interval. That's the hard part too. Now, p-value. P-value just stands for probability value, okay? But what it means, and the part that's important to you, is that your p-value, if it is less than 0.05, it means it's statistically significant, okay? So all that means is that it determines the strength of your evidence. So if you have one part that you're measuring and one part that you're keeping standard, like your control arm, right? So you've got two things you're comparing. All that means is that if it is less than 0.05, it means that the results will be statistically significant between each other, that there is a difference. That's what it means. Again, with the jokes, we got some good ones. That's a cute one. Come on. That's funny. See, that's a good one. No means no, right? All right, here's our first ball. Mel's gonna bring up your first bingo ball here. Yep, good. Excellent, see? All right. Can you see it? No. It's Pico. So you can cross off your Pico. I know, I'm sorry. I think it might be on that table, I don't know. Okay. Who's got Pico? Yeah, we're on our way. Oh, I got power. Okay, we got one more to go. So the third one that I think about is power, okay? So power estimates the number of participants that you need in order to reach that statistically significant difference. So power will increase as the sample size increases. So remember, sample size was our small n. So if our small n gets bigger, then we have more power to our research, right? And I forgot to ask, I don't know if Gaz is here this morning. Gaz, I meant to ask him, but I don't know if you guys caught it, but yesterday he said he had a great example with his research. He said he wanted to increase his power by getting more participants. And that's exactly a great example of what we're talking about here. So you just want to be in that other part, and in order to stay in that part of the graph that is power, you just want to increase your number of participants to give your results more power, more statistically significant. And then the other part of the definitions are limitations. So when you're looking at a research article, a lot of times they will tell you, the limitations of their research. Usually you can find the limitations at the end of the discussion, right before the conclusion. And the reason that I like the limitations is it kind of tells me what's wrong with the paper, right? Like what they didn't find out, or what they wish they would have done better, because there's always something that we wish we could have done better. So sometimes it's something as low as not having enough subjects to study, like I wish I could have done more. Some of it is we ran out of funding, some of it is just that this was a retrospective study. And there's nothing wrong with retrospective, except that what you're doing with retrospective is you're going back and researching, right? You're not actually actively participating in clinical change, right? So it's just understanding some of these simple definitions, right? So the other thing it could be is a great example for us is rare events. So for instance, if you're practicing oxygenator changeouts, right? In simulation, like you can practice it, and you can do it, but unfortunately you can't really measure that too much because it doesn't really happen that much in real life, right? So that could be a limitation. And then, with the one arm larger than the other arm. So for example, if you're studying COVID patients and you've got, 1,000 patients in one arm and only 50 patients in the other arm, that you're gonna have trouble with, all of your statistics that we were just referring to, with your power, with your p-value, all of that is gonna come into play. So just understanding what the limitations are will sometimes help you understand some of those complicated statistics we were just talking about. So we got one more bingo ball here. Can you see that bingo ball? What does it say?
Oh, I can't see the answer.
Yeah, we can't see it either. Can you make the bingo ball bigger?
Go to the next slide.
It's bias. We're killing it. We're killing it. This is awesome. Yeah, I'm excited too. All right. All right, now Mel's gonna help you with the next section.
All right, so when you're looking at a research paper, the first thing you want to do is recognize that there are 7 distinct parts to a paper. The type of research, the research question, the level of evidence, the methodology, statistics utilized, ethics, and conclusion. So the type of research, there are a couple of different types of research that can be conducted. The first thing you want to do is determine which type of research a publication is. This can be important in assessing the weight the conclusion may have and potential limitations the study may exhibit. So we're going to go through a few examples, but we're not going to hit all of the different types of research. Hopefully we've chosen the ones that are most pertinent to perfusionists. The first is expert opinion. So an expert opinion is considered a respected authority on the subject based on their clinical experience, and they put their knowledge, expertise, and experience to the test. They're sought out when there is insufficient empirical evidence to judge the safety implications of a course of action. The second type is a case report. A case report is a formal summary of a unique patient, their illness, signs and symptoms, diagnostic studies, treatment course, and outcome. These can be valuable, but lately, when we have things like a randomized controlled trial or a systematic review, people tend to push down a case report in terms of clinical usefulness. However, I think the majority of perfusionists can say that a successful case report has saved them and has helped with patient care on more than one occasion. So the value to a case report is when ethical constraints prohibit experimental research from being conducted. The high applicability in clinical care is the only way to present unusual, uncontrolled observations regarding the symptoms, clinical findings, course of illness, complications of interventions, associations of diseases, or side effects. The second type is a case series. Similar to a case report, it's an observational study that reports on data from a subject group without a comparison population. So whereas a case report is the detailed account of one patient, a case series provides multiple patients within the same publication. These are great because it's a feasible study design, it's easy to conduct, and it requires less time and financial resource than a randomized controlled trial, a case control, or a cohort study. And they're often used to describe outcomes of novel treatments. The next we have is randomized controlled trial. These are considered the highest level of evidence to establish causal associations in clinical research. So what does that mean? So a randomized controlled trial means that we're going to take a population, and then we're going to find our sample in that population, and we're going to randomize them into 2 or more different arms or groups. One group will be a control group, and the others will be a treatment group for an experiment. This is considered the gold standard of clinical trial design. There are many types of designs and feature variations in RCTs, which will be out of the scope for this current presentation. Lastly, we have a systematic review. So a narrative review is when somebody takes all of the research within a specific subtopic and they synthesize it for their audience. A systematic review differs from a narrative review in the fact that there is a specific methodology in how we're going to acquire the various papers on a topic, and then we're going to conduct statistics on it if it's a meta-analysis, and then we're going to synthesize a conclusion for the audience. And usually these allow us to find the highest level of evidence within guidelines for evidence-based medicine. And we have another bingo.
It is p-value. Who's got p-value? Woo! Wow. Well, that was a lot. Okay. All right. So the second part of what she was talking about in her list of the parts of research paper is the research question. And this is something that I have recently come across, and it's a PICO question. Anybody have any idea what the P stands for in PICO? Is it pistachio? Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Is it pistachio, publication, peer-reviewed, or population? Pistachio. Everybody thinks it's pistachio or pudding. Tell me, yell it out. Population, you're right. Yes, good. So I created this little fun tool for you. It's just a nice way to remember when you're going through a paper, how to kind of pull out the important parts and kind of figure out exactly what they're trying to get through with the paper. And so for me, this is how I kind of break it down and simplify the paper. So what is the research question of the paper? What are they trying to get across to me, right? So the population, you pull it out. The intervention, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to research? And then comparison, what are they trying to compare? What is in one arm versus the other arm? And the outcome, what did they prove or what did they not prove? And then time, when were they looking at it? And we're gonna go over this a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you this little tool that I created here. We have a bingo ball. And it is case report. Damn it. That was awesome. Okay, so I am going to use Pico to show you some examples, just real quick, using the GIF trial from 2018. So what I did is I went through and pulled out all of these parts for you, just to break it down real quick to give you an example. So with the goal-directed perfusion to reduce acute kidney injury, right? So just at the end of the introduction, usually just right before methods, you can usually pull out most of the information. Not always, but most of it. And so there's two parts to this. So this is the first part. So again, just before that methods section, you can usually pull out most of your information. So you can see I got my population. So all patients undergoing moderately hypothermic cardiopulmonary bypass. The intervention was to avoid a DO2, less than 280. Didn't get a comparison. The outcome was a reduction in the rate of post-op AKI, and the time was in post-operative, right? So you got kind of the quick gist of it. And then this tells me, okay, do I want to read this paper? Do I want to keep going? Because again, my list gets pretty big after the meetings, right? Now, once I get through this, then I say, okay, I want to go ahead and read the paper, and I get in and I get more information. So then I'll keep showing you what we do, what I do. Come on, you can do it. Can you do it? Come on. There we go. Oh. Bingo ball. Oh, sorry. Okay, levels of evidence. Yay. Good job. You know what? Good job.
Just to spite you.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. It wasn't my fault. It's the remote.
Sure.
This remote hates me. Okay, all right, it's fine, whatever. Okay, so everybody got levels of evidence? No, the whole blackout. You missed that. Sorry. Blackout bingo. Otherwise, you only got to get 3. Yeah, blackout bingo. But don't forget, ICEBP is free spot. Okay, so population. So after you decide that you do want to read the paper, after you've gone through your quick version, here's your population. So what is the target population of this study? Who are they looking to affect and what were they doing? So the total number of patients in this study after the inclusion and the exclusion criteria that we were talking about earlier. So all patients who were the age of greater than 18 years and scheduled for cardiac surgery with an expected cardiopulmonary bypass duration of greater than 90 minutes were eligible for inclusion in the study. Super easy, right? All right, I got my population. Intervention. What were they trying to do? Again, avoid the DO2 nadir of less than 280 mLs per minute. Comparison. What are they trying to compare? So this is what I was talking about. It wasn't quite in the other one, so I had to dig a little bit deeper to see what they were trying to compare. So the other side, what they wanted to do was compare it to if they kept the target value of the 2.4 liters per minute. So that's your comparison, right? So your comparison with the DO2. Now the outcome. So the outcome, what they wanted to end up with, or what they did end up with, was that the reduction in the rate of postoperative AKI in patients undergoing moderately hypothermic bypass. So easy enough to pull out. You just have to kind of dig just a little bit and you've got it. And then time. What were they looking to do? What was the follow-up, or where were they actually measuring the information? So earlier we got post-op, right? We figured that out, but it was, what are we actually doing? And so then when you go into the paper, you can see, okay, it was actually within the first 48 hours. And that's where they were measuring to actually see if these patients ended up with AKI or not. Make sense? Yeah, right? Super fun. Bingo! Let's try again, sorry.
Don't pull the trigger too early.
Okay, okay.
All right.
Okay, it is conclusion. You got conclusion over there, girl?
Damn it.
Renee, you don't look very happy with your card. She's sitting there, she's like. Courtney, you don't have any?
I got a bad card.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're up, you're up.
You got nothing.
I got nothing.
The next part we're going to go through is levels of evidence. We've taken some liberty with the original chart from the AHA and the ACC, and we've broken it down a little bit more simplistically just to drive home the main point that we would like to. So you can see that under class 1, the benefit definitely overcomes the risk for the intervention. In class 2, we have 2A and 2B, and the relative strength of those recommendations change from 2A and 2B. We can see that by the time we get to 2B, the benefit is marginally better or equal to the risk to the patient. In class 3, the benefit might not be better, and there may actually be harm to the patient. So for the sake of this presentation and keeping with the fundamentals of a research article, that's all we want you to remember at this point. So we're going to give you a few examples. For a class 1A, consider this the type of recommendation that you can put your foot down and you can make a strong argument for to help your patient. One example of this comes from the updates on patient blood management, and it says that the routine use of red cell salvage using centrifugation is helpful for blood conservation in cardiac operations using CPB. By the time we get to class 2B, we have a little bit of an issue in terms of consensus across the board in terms of clinical practice and whether or not there is a big effect size on your patient population in terms of outcomes. So the use of heparin concentration monitoring in addition to ACT might be considered for the maintenance of CPB. This strategy has been associated with a significant reduction in thrombin generation, fibrinolysis, and neutrophil activation. However, its effects on postoperative bleeding and blood transfusion are inconsistent. And then we get to class 3. By the time we get to class 3, a recommendation might look something like this. In adult cardiac surgery with CPB, mannitol is not recommended to reduce the risk of CSA AKI. And we have another bingo.
The other one.
It is sample size.
Gertie, you got one?
Yay!
Oh, we're frozen again.
Okay, methodology. So when I get to the methodology section, these are often the questions that I ask myself. So first of all, again, going with the PICO question, right? So stick with that plan of action. So exclusion, what patients were excluded? Which ones did they include, right? Did they only pick super healthy cabbages, or did they, include all of the patients? You just kind of want to look at who's included, who's excluded, but also why, right? Like, what are they evaluating and why did they put those people together? And then also, if you're going with the intervention, right? Did they give a drug? Did they use the cell saver? Like, those are the kind of questions you want to ask yourself. You want to figure out how they're working together. And then for comparison, what's different about the different arms? What are they comparing? What are they putting together? Is one of the comparison arms, are the patients more sick and the other ones are healthier patients? You have to make sure they're comparing apples to apples, or, figure out what's going on with that. And then the outcome, sometimes, like we were just talking last night about it, like when you read a paper, it's okay to say, like, is this realistic? Like, trust your gut, right? Like, is it realistic? And also, was it relevant to the intervention? Like, what were they doing, and did it make sense to get that sort of outcome? Did they achieve the result that they wanted to achieve? And then, of course, with time. So sometimes what you want to do is you want to take a look and see, was the study continuous? And if it wasn't, why? So if they had a break in their results, why? Was it that they wanted to break it up into different timeframes? Were they looking for specific patients? Things like that. Or did they not have enough people in the study, so they had to restart? And there's nothing wrong with that, but understanding the answers to these questions will help you understand the methodology a little bit better. Another joke: statistics can be made to prove anything, even the truth.
So I've taken a little bit of liberty with the statistics slide. I'm not going to sit here and teach you about a Kruskal-Wallis test, because I couldn't. So instead, I found a really interesting paper that talked about the limitations to statistics and how it could be misconstrued or misinterpreted within a research article, and how to tackle that issue. So the first major pillar is internal validity. The first thing you actually want to do is not start with statistics when thinking about statistics. It's examining the study design and being satisfied with the reasonableness of the question being asked and how it was conducted. The second thing you want to do is try to measure the accuracy and precision of said statistics. The precision is how close the measured values are to each other, and the accuracy are how close values are to the true population value. So some of the issues when these things are not present is that you can get a biased sample, so your conclusions would be irrepresentative of different populations. You can have overgeneralization issues. You might not be able to prove causality, so you might have one variable that has a relationship to another variable, but the first variable or second was not caused by the other. You can have a completely incorrect analysis, or you can have something called data mining. And data mining is really what happens when you collect variables and then you start to run one-too-many tests. Although I'm not too sure what kind of person wants to sit there and run one-too-many tests on anything. But if you start doing that, eventually you will reach a significant value, but it might not be related to the initial research question. So a lot of times, if you have access to a statistician, the first thing you want to do is approach them before starting your study and defining what tests will be conducted and which variables will be necessary before even beginning the experiment. The last thing you want to do is judge the clinical significance. So for perfusionists, statistical significance is important, but clinical significance might be a little bit more valuable to us. And that requires us using judgment, clinical expertise, and the respect for context. So if you have a drug that does a better job, statistically significantly better job than drug B at reducing migraines in your patients, but you happen to be in an area where patients don't have access to really great healthcare insurance, and drug A, although being better, happens to be triple the cost, or it might be harder to procure. That might mean that within the respect for context for your patient population, it might not be the best idea to create a clinical change where drug A becomes the first-line choice. So the next thing we want to discuss is ethics. So Shahna and I arrived in New Orleans, and we decided that we were going to do a quick survey. And we decided to stake out Café du Monde, and we found that 10 out of 10 survey participants preferred Café du Monde over Café Beignet. Except the only thing we were really looking at is how much sugar was still stuck to that person when they walked out the door. So when we talk about ethics, it's an all-encompassing subject. There are 7 major pillars to ethics: social and clinical value, scientific validity, fair subject selection, favorable risk-benefit ratio, independent review, informed consent, and respect for potential and enrolled subjects. The other thing you want to decide when you're reading a research paper in terms of ethics is, was the study funded? Who was it funded by? Who were the authors? Whether or not they had a personal stake in the outcomes that they were measuring, if they decided to handpick the centers that were going to participate in a multi-center trial, and it just so happens that all centers chosen were their top performing with their device. So these are some questions that you want to consider in terms of ethics when reading a research paper.
Sorry, I got excited. And finally, the conclusion. So when you get to the conclusion, so you've done all of the work to read all of the paper, and you get to the conclusion, and you want to ask yourself again, does the conclusion have the answer to the research question? And how did we get to the research question? By answering all of the PICO questions, right? That helps us get there. And then the other thing that I ask myself, or that I'm curious about, is this going to help me with my clinical experience? Like, that's why we're reading papers, right? Because we want to improve our patient care. We want to make changes to our practice. So I also, when I'm reading a paper, I look at it and say, okay, is this going to be helpful to myself and my practice and my patients? And then again, did this meet what I was looking for? Is this helpful to me? And one of the things that I put on here is references. I tend to find myself reading papers being like, okay, like this was great, or it got me what I needed. But also, the more advanced that I've got on reading papers, the more I find myself actually going and reading the references that were attached to that paper. And sometimes I find more or better information that I was actually looking for. So my point in saying this is that as you start to get better at reading papers, like keep going, right? Like get to the bottom and end the conclusion, but then also jump to the references. If you didn't get quite the answer you were looking for, check out those references and see where they got their information, and that might help you as well.
We're almost done here, hang in there. So to reiterate, that there are 7 parts to a paper when looking at a research publication: the type, the question, the level of evidence, the methodology, the statistics, ethics, and conclusion.
Anybody close to bingo?
Curdy, you got one.
Huh? RCTs, woo! Did you get it, for real? You got bingo too! Yay! Anyone else? Yeah, one back there.
We do need to validate the cards.
Anybody else? No? Should have 5.
Rob, do we have time to go through the 5? Sorry? Do we have time to go through the 5
Yeah,
papers?
okay.
Don't even.
Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll double check. That's okay.
Okay.
So were there prizes? You did promise prizes.
Yeah, I do have prizes.
You're on
I
the
do
front.
have prizes. We can do prizes later.
We could do them now.
You're on the front of the stage.
Huh?
Right there.
Yeah, do you want me to hand them out right now?
We do it.
Okay.
Keep going, Mel.
Okay, keep going, Mel.
Okay, so Shahna and I chose 5 articles every perfusionist should read in 2024. These are hyperlinked, and the PowerPoint will be available after the session and after the conference. So if you guys wanted to, you can access it and just click on it, and you can get to the paper easily, or just take a screenshot, as I see some of you are very savvy in doing right now.
It's also on the back of your bingo card too.
Yes, it's on the back of your bingo card as well. It is a take-home resource. Shahna made me say that. Okay, so the first paper that we picked was Artificial Intelligence-Based Early Detection of Acute Kidney Injury After Cardiac Surgery. We really chose this paper because AI has recently come to the forefront in terms of the media, but this is one of the first papers that we're starting to see where we're starting to integrate AI into clinical practice for medicine. The really interesting part about this paper was that the system that they chose was transparent, meaning you didn't just plug data in or tell the AI which variables you wanted to look at, and then have them spit something out for you without you understanding what the computer did in the middle. You could see the entire process on its own. So you can see exactly what the computer decided to do with your data. It was low cost, and it's integratable into multiple platforms. The second paper that we chose were outcomes after neonatal cardiac surgery, the impact of a dedicated neonatal cardiac program. So I am a little biased because this was conducted at New York Presbyterian. But really the interesting part about it was the post-operative care. It didn't focus on intraoperative care. And they talked about some of the items that made them very successful in their clinical practice caring for this high-risk population. And the take-home message was that a multidisciplinary team approach was the key to their success. They really lean on allied health professionals as part of a daily discussion, and they focus on the continuum of care of every patient, from prenatal care all the way through delivery, as well as the ICU inpatient setting. And the one thing that I really enjoyed was their limitation section was more robust than one would expect. And they talked about how resource allocation assessment was not done, but with the decreased mortality rates that they saw, they believe that the cost offset is positive. So again, taking that with a grain of salt, that's their hypothesis, but that was not tested. I know it's quite difficult to try to pit how do you find the amount of money that it took to add on a nutritionist and a physical therapist and a perfusionist and a nurse and pharmacy into your daily rounds, and what is the true cost of a mortality at a hospital. And it was fantastic because they didn't exclude high-risk populations such as the STS-CHD level 5 patients. Those were also included in this assessment. So they didn't just take straightforward cases to look at their outcomes. The third one that we picked was the problem with making safety 2 work in healthcare. So this was a novel concept for me, actually. I learned about this while reading this paper for this presentation. So a lot of us are used to quality improvement, Lean Six Sigma processes, fishbone diagrams to get to the root cause of an issue. Safety 2 does things a little bit differently. So it's a novel model for quality improvement, and basically, quality improvement, the traditional view, is that a system is black and white, predictable, with one item for a cause and effect. Safety 2 talks about it as a dynamic, complex being with multiple moving parts. So it moves away from making one item the center of the root cause, but rather focuses more on the entire process and at which point changes should be made. The other paper that we chose was the clinical practice guidelines for AKI. And we really chose this because it has a high relevance to cardiac surgery. The guidelines took quite a long time to develop, and we feel that it hadn't garnered much spotlight recently, so we wanted to reiterate that point. I also thought it was very interesting because some of the guidelines that they included in there mentioned different biomarkers for AKI that aren't formally recognized by KDIGO yet, but there have been recent publications on as earlier biomarkers for AKI than serum creatinine, such as beta-2 macroglobulins. They also talked about the reduction in use of mannitol. And I thought this was fascinating, but they also talked about using balloon pumps intraoperatively during surgery, which I still can't quite figure out in my brain, but we can all adapt. The last one that we chose was called Transparency, Public Reporting, and a Culture of Change to Quality and Safety in Cardiac Surgery. This highlighted the Department of Surgery at UPenn, Pennsylvania. And the interesting part about this paper was that they specifically verbatim talked about transitioning from singular heroics towards systemic change. And their approach used, again, a multidisciplinary team. And they established task forces with various health professionals on them to discuss where changes could be made within each department collectively, and then tested those changes to see if the outcomes were getting better. So they were quite transparent about how their ratings fell within the STS and then the steps that they took to mitigate for that to get back up. And last but not least, don't be mean, be above average. I know, it's corny. We want to thank the ICEBP for allowing us to have fun with this presentation, which was not formally approved, and they had no idea about 2/3 of what we pulled up here. But also to hopefully knock some of the complications out of reading a paper, and thank you guys for waking up early and coming to listen to us talk.
Hey, Dawn, will you get up and read your card so we can double check it? Because we should have 5 winners. Students, do you know who your winners were?
You're probably sitting on the.
Ugh. Okay, more coffee for us. Okay, ready, double check your card.
This is evidence-based, so sample size, PICO, level of evidence, conclusion.
Wait, you're going way too fast. They gotta check their cards. Slow down, man. Okay, go. Okay. Did he just sigh?
Sample size.
Okay.
You should do it like Susanna. PICO, level of evidence, conclusions, RCTs, p-value, case reports, bias.
I get it.
Okay.
You're wrong.
Okay, if you
You're
want,
dead to me, Mark.
if you want, come see us after the presentations. But now, should we take questions? No, no questions.
We'll take questions. So would anyone from the floor like to make any comments about the last part of this presentation, and then we'll flick back and talk about any more topics from the subcommittee reports. I think it's always, excuse me, really important to step back and try and work out, as you know, clinicians, when we look at a paper. I thought some of the areas that the guys highlighted were really important. And I think one of them that we sometimes forget is, you know, what is the clinical significance of a change that's reported as statistically significant? You know, we'll often see a p-value, but we'll see 2 figures in 2 columns and they're almost identical. And the reason there's a p-value there is the sample size is so large. So you've got to sort of take all this into, and this sort of brings in what they were talking about in terms of context. You know, you've always got to look at what is the study really about and what is the meaning of the changes that are being reported. Donnie, did you want to make any comments on that excellent presentation? I think a lot of us were fearful that we may go into a broken, constrained stick model of analysis or something. But I think it's important to recognise that we don't have to be statisticians to read the literature. And when we get to a point in the literature that we don't understand, we can go to other people and ask for help. And that's, you know, something that we've, you know, regularly got to do if we want to get the best out of our literature. But don't be turned off by a big method section. Think about why it's there and what it's showing. Thanks, Donnie.
Yeah, thank you for the session and the fact that the people up on the team would have actually did a much better job than any one of us would have done. My own team at the University of Michigan, I think what we try to do is to say this is not a transactional relationship, it's actually a collaboration. And our biostatistical analysts contribute a great deal beyond just executing the idea in a program, and actually want to learn the clinical context to make it much more meaningful. And you know, I think it's been a very rewarding experience on both sides, both the ability to get to the right answer, but also for people whose job responsibility is to analyze data, to learn about what you do. And I think the more that we can think about this as being a relationship instead of just, you know, type numbers into a program, makes it a much richer collegial relationship. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah.
I don't have a question for the last part of the presentation, but I do have a question for the panel. about if you're going to, make a checklist or make a debriefing tool, are you also considering adding instructions for use to that tool, so we actually know how to use it? Any comments?
Absolutely. All our toolkits have some form of instruction manual that goes with them. And this is also, our goal is to actually publish a journal article based on our findings as well. So within that journal article itself, you'll see our methodology, but you'll see our conclusions. And within that, you'll see some instructions for use as well. So.
It's exciting.
Maybe if we'll work on our population and our sample size. We'll make it work.
We did have an online question about the scope of practice, and I'll read it verbatim. Why does our scope of practice, including state licensure, not protect our profession from other professions?
I don't think I understand the question, but your state licensure does protect you from other professions encroaching on our scope of practice. The scope of practice document itself it's a model document. It's used in the bill writing process, and it's really up to the state societies or whoever is governing the licensing part of your state to use it as a tool to build upon. But and that was one of our concerns when we were teasing out the clinical part of it. It's easy to use the clinical part of it as a cut and paste document and put it into your bill writing process versus putting the performance, the professional standard or professional performances into it. If you remember from the slides, one of the professional standards or professional performance standards was research. Now, research is a very all-encompassing term that that's not relegate just to perfusion. So we felt it was necessary to pull that out specifically. So that's why there are two specific standards, one for clinical and one for non-clinical. Now, the licensing part of it, that should be protecting us from other disciplinaries encroaching on our field.
Does anyone else have any questions around the scope of practice work? Seems to me that as our role changes so dynamically, it's a really important piece of work that needs to be kept up to date. I think we've heard through the meeting people talking about their own situation and their own practice, and when new technologies, new activities are being introduced, where we as perfusionists fit into the role. And when we don't pick up on some of these new technologies, we can be left behind as a profession. So I think it's a really important piece of work that our society is doing for us. It's not attracting any comments from anyone. Everyone's pretty happy with where we're going with that.
And we're still open to suggestions this is your membership, this is your society. It's for us, by us, which is why it was necessary for us to include not just the adult perfusionists, but the pediatric perfusionists and all the other subcommittees that do participate within our membership. We all see things from different angles, right? So, from a GRC perspective, we're looking at the legality of it and using it from a governmental standard. The quality department sees it from their version, and so there's a safety standard, a safety committee. So, and even you on your day-to-day life, if there's something that you do that's not on that, let us know. We'll be happy to throw it on there and to not necessarily use it to protect you, but to use it as a sounding board for other perfusionists who may actually be doing the same thing.
Dave?
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for the great session. I think he gave me a broken bingo card, but otherwise I enjoyed it. Just a comment to dovetail off of Rob was just indicating about scope of practice and how clinical practice evolves, and we've seen quite a bit of an innovation of technology, all related to extracorporeal support, and we'll have a session this afternoon about DCDs and an organ procurement system and where perfusion fits into that. And it's going to happen, it's happening now. And we have to decide as an industry in technologies like that, whether we're going to embrace it or allow others to take that clinical service, out of the auspices of perfusionists. I mean, incredibly biased, as most of you in the room are here, but we're the profession that's formally educated on handling things all related to blood management and extracorporeal support. So why wouldn't we, want to take that on, not just to protect our own practice and our own careers, but more importantly, what we think is in the best interest of the patients we serve. And, the point that you made, Rob, about how quickly things change is true. We're seeing it. We're seeing it evolve, almost on a daily basis. And, I would implore, the ICEBP, our committee, as well as all key stakeholders, for me as a perfusion educator, I need to ensure that, my students are receiving this information and being educated on it as we're, matriculating them into our profession. And, I think as clinicians, we should all be in some aspects, trying to rally and champion over making sure that we can continue to contribute in a positive way to patient outcomes. So I appreciate what you guys are doing with that work.
We do have an online comment, or a couple actually, in regard to the intra-aortic balloon pump piece that you raised, Mel. The comment is, with regard to the IABP interoperatively, it would be set on internal once the cross clamp is put on to augment renal perfusion during the ischemic time. And the second comment is similar in terms of supplying pulsatile flow to the kidneys. The only randomised work that was done in this area was done probably 15 years or years plus. And I think there was a series of 3 or 4 papers. And it was a very good example of exactly what we've heard about today, which is reading the papers in detail. Because the final paper, you realise when you'd gone through all of the previous paper, actually was a summary of the 3 previous papers. So when the literature was being reviewed and it came up that there were 4 papers supporting this, the use of the balloon pump, early on, it looked as though it was quite, it was going to be something that potentially would make into a guideline. However, all of the evidence was from one study. It was just written up 3 times. So it was just a really interesting example of you really need to read the literature properly. The rest of the literature around pulsatile flow is so discordant that we just don't have enough evidence at this point in time. So it's really, I think, going forward, where pulsatile flow finishes up is going to be quite interesting as we get, again, new technologies to deliver, something that's a more physiological pulsatile flow. So thanks to the online people for those comments. Do we have any other questions, guys? We've got a little bit of time left. Shahna?
Just a new statement when we're done.
Can I give a remark? I can, regarding the scope of practice, and I'm sorry if I'm going back to that, but so I'm studying for respiratory therapist at the moment, and so RTs are licensed in every state except for Alaska, and so every state has a RT society, a state society, and they're all supported by the American Association of Respiratory Care. And so what I can only speak for Iowa, for the Iowa state licensure, but they actually have they hire lobbyists that are constantly in the state capitol, running around, talking to senators and representatives. And whenever there's like a red light going off, then we are actually, we get an email and they say like, okay, there's a bill coming up. We need to start doing actions. You have to write to your representatives. And there's a whole system where they try to protect the scope of practice of RTs, because sometimes, and it's called, there's a practice that's called practice scraping, and it's literally when you try to change your scope of practice in a bill, then it becomes open to the public, and then other societies will come and they literally scrape all the scopes, your own scope, away from your profession. And so, for example, I cannot remember the details, but in Nebraska, perfusionists or RTs were not allowed to do ECMO anymore. And you could say like, oh, well, but sometimes hospitals actually get into problems because of that, because your ECMO program relies on a group of experienced individuals, and suddenly they're not allowed to do that anymore because some other group of professionals try to get away, try to take that away from you. So I think it's important, and like we heard Dr. Sund talk yesterday about being a community. Well, that's what the RTs do at this point. Like they literally call out everyone in the community to do something about it. I just wanted to remark on that.
Okay, we don't have any more online questions. Does anyone else have any other questions? I know Shahna wants to talk to us a little bit more to close out, but before we go there, any more questions? Okay, Shahna?
I did want to address Luke, and Luke, I agree with you, and we have our own subcommittee here, it's the GRC. We monitor, and we're actively monitoring now because now the legislative session started in January. So we're actively reading close to 700 different bills that are put across our desk. And we, AMSEC, your professional society, pays for a filtering software that, based on our zones, we can filter out things, keywords like healthcare, labor, perfusion, respiratory therapy, respiratory therapist, scope of practice, anything that triggers those, the bill has those trigger words, it pops up into some of our emails, and we read them, and then we reach out to the state liaisons and let them know, hey, there's something going on in your state. There's a respiratory therapy bill that clearly states that they want to do ECMO. And not necessarily that's a bad thing, but if they are licensed to be the only person to do ECMO, you guys are out of a job. Because legally, you cannot perform the duties of a licensed personnel. So those are the things that we also do for the membership here as well. So keep that in mind that as Dave said, as our technology expands and our techniques get better and new industry standards and devices come out, we really need to capitalize on what really belongs in under our umbrella and not give those things away.
We've had an interesting question come in from our wider audience, so I'll just read it to you. As perfusionists strive to increase their scope of practice with new technologies, the amount of time and commitment required will also increase. A lot of the talks we've focused on over the meeting have been about work-life balance. Do you see this could be an issue? So really they're saying, okay guys, you complain all the time that you want to be able to go home, you want to not be on call, but then you also want to increase take everything that comes along as part of our scope of practice. Do you see that as being an issue?
Yeah, I'll take that question. So interestingly enough, in New York, there's been a crop up of a few companies that will provide NRP and DCD services, and it's on a per diem basis. So a lot of perfusionists in New York are able to saddle on with that company and take on a case at their leisure, whether they want to, but they're never forced to, and they're not dropped from the company for declining a run. I think really what it comes down to is just being creative with structuring how perfusion is as a profession. I don't see why we couldn't move towards a model where there are companies where perfusionists are salaried and work full-time, but only provide DCD services, or some places even have per diem perfusionists that only work ECMO in the ICU. I think for a long time we've defined our position as cardiopulmonary bypass, which is extremely important, but I think with the upcoming generation of perfusionists with a lot of energy and interest, that just because we take it on doesn't mean every single person in this room has to take it on, but perhaps there's a cohort of us that would be willing to do it and would be able to provide a higher quality of care to patients because of our background in perfusion.
Yeah, I think, Mel, you've really summed that up really well. Just because a scope is included, it doesn't mean everyone has to participate in it. And I think, that's a really mature approach for us as a profession to understand that, we're all perfusionists, but we're all different as well, and our scope of practice individually is different. So thank you for that.
It also happens to be that NRP is like really something that has a high incentive to do, because the pay is really good apparently. So that's also something that plays in a role, I think. You know, you have scope of practice, you have things you can do, but does it just add to your job that you already have? Or is it something that makes your job more attractive?
Okay, this is actually a pretty relevant question too that's come in. Would the certification process need to change with these new additional roles? So that's really, Karim, will come to you next, or did you want to answer in relation to that question?
No, I have a comment.
Okay, does anyone want to make a comment around the impact of these changing roles on certification? It seems to me that a good certification process would be responsive to what our scope of practice is. So as we, you know, I think over in the States, is it 40 cases annually? Is that correct for yeah, okay. So what those 40 cases may be, you know, traditionally it was 40 pump runs. You know, as we go forward, we've got to change that to be reflective of what we do. Karim.
Yeah,
I just want to jump on that, Rob, a second. So if you look at what the American board has done, they've done a fantastic job of incorporating things like ECMO and standby. So as our scope changes and evolves and expands, the American board, I think they understand that, and they transition how really to get certified based on what the temperature of the field looks like. So I think they've done a great job of that, and I don't doubt that they would continue to evolve as our practice standard evolves. The American board evolves as well. So I know there may be some representatives here today who probably can answer that better than I can. Okay.
yeah, I think it's time for us as a profession in this country to be classified as an advanced practice practitioners. I think we are qualified. I think we are up there. The CRNA, we're able to be classified as practitioners. I think the time has come in where we get out of, HR and move toward being member of the medical staff of the hospital. I think this is an individual departments should maybe approach their hospitals and maybe they can start this process. There is some things in the bylaws of the hospital, and I looked at a few bylaws, and most of them we can fit in within what the bylaws says. So I think it's about time for us to move into a different level of professionalism and be members of our hospital medical staff.
To follow up with what Kareem said, for my 31st year in a row, I'll say this, and you're right, being a member of the hospital medical staff while doing the 40 cases and all the clinical work is critical. I look at people like Dave Fitzgerald, who has his DHA, people, and one of the members of my quality committee who is great, who's moved up and is now the director of the OR at her hospital. And I keep using the analogy, if you're the president of the Harvard School of Medicine and you're an MD and you're not seeing patients, you're still an MD. We talk about moving up and having more part of this control in healthcare. To do that, I wish there was some way that being administrative, being that kind of thing, moving up and not strictly in the clinical arena, you could still be a perfusionist, because the trouble is when you move up, unless you've got 20 years and are a CCP emeritus like me, you lose all that and it becomes parochial. You can't go to another institution because it's like, well, who are you? Well, I used to be a perfusionist and I did some administrative stuff. Yeah, no thanks. So just a thought, as more and more perfusionists get MHSAs, MHAs, MBAs, could there be some way that that can be facilitated so we can be part of the bigger healthcare picture?
One of the biggest benefits that I see being in the medical staff is the access for you to attend meetings. I'm classified right now as an APP, And I was told I can attend any meeting I want to, and all my dues would be paid for. So it's not really the parking or the food or whatever, but it's the, the support that we get. It's above and beyond being under HR nowadays.
Just while this is coming to the mic, I mean, this is a really important point that you've raised about, as we transition career-wise into different roles as perfusionists, losing our clinical standing and potentially losing your CCP is really challenging. I mean, I'm certainly, entering into that phase, and it's quite confronting. You've defined yourself by your role for your whole career, and then to consider that maybe you can't be a CCP is really weird. So sorry.
No problem. Bill Harris, New Orleans. I have to make a comment, and it's slightly negative to what Mark said, concerning the American board doing a fantastic job. The new American board over the last 5 to 6 years, 8 years possibly, but it took decades of some of us fighting to get ECMO to have some credit within the American board during 80s, 90s, and it took a lot of sweat on some leaders like John Tomasian, myself, there were Dennis Rivard, to get the board to recognize that. So it was not a fantastic job back then. Let's move forward. I encourage the societies more than ever, AMSECT, American Board, the Academy, to come together and to update these strategies that are taking place, that are evolving with perfusion, so that possibly the American Board, our only certifying agency, could be more responsive to the changes in our practices as they propagate, as they move forward. But it really took decades for some recognition, and we lost ECMO for a long time. It was a fight to get it back. And then once cases started going down because of TAVRs and other situations, I would guess then that it was accepted, but it took a long time. So again, moving forward, looking to the future, I encourage more participation between the different perfusion societies to communicate, update, and move forward and give credit where credit's due to keep our profession growing.
Thank you, Bill. I think that's a valid point. I think I think it was brought up actually, and thank you for clarifying that for us. I think it's important. It was mentioned a couple times during the last few days. Is you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been, and I think there's a of gratitude to you all who've been working on this prior to some of our arrival, and definitely before the new students who come across, to keep that in mind and to remind us that there are struggles that were hard in the past and probably going to continue to be struggles in the future. So thank you so much.
Duarte?
Hello, I'm Juan Blanco from Spain, and I'd like to share a little bit of our experience in this field, because I think these problems are frequent in every part of the world. And our particular situation in my hospital, we tried to solve the problem, creating an ECLS care and perfusion unit that clarified our role, and now we participate in every extracorporeal support process. We do for sure our cardiopulmonary bypass, but also nobody has any doubt about the importance of our role in the ECMO program, as not only to establish the therapy, also to provide training to all the team, also nurses and ICU doctors, in adults and pediatrics, simulation and quality assessment of the process. Also, we participate in NRP, TA-NRP, and I'm happy for that, but the real situation is that this is not happening in all the country and not in all the countries. So I encourage you to try to fight together and establish a kind of recommendations as a society, or maybe collaboration between societies, to define the exact role of the perfusionist and the requirements of having perfusionists, because of our expertise in every process where an extracorporeal support takes a relevant role.
Thank you. Okay. Shahna, did you want to say some final closing words?
Yes. So we just wanted to say thank you again for letting us get up here and have some fun today. But, you know, we hope you had fun. We had a great time creating the presentation. You know, but the point of the presentation today and the point of our morning was, you know, just to remind you that we all struggle with the commitment to read the papers and understand the papers and keep up with the research. I mean, not all of us need to be as handsome and brilliant as that side of the table, right? So but it's important. You know, we've been talking all weekend about how, you know, in order to be a professional, you know, you need to belong to AMSECT. But in order to be a professional, it's also your responsibility to stay up on the reading and to stay connected with the most recent literature, right? But it is a challenge. It is a challenge for every single one of us. So we wanted to have fun and, you know, yeah, we got carried away with the bingo and, you know, the balls were nuts, but we wanted to, they didn't quite work out, but, you know, we hope you had fun, but we hope you learned something today too. And so thank you for having fun with us today, and please come get your coffee. So, thank you. Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you.